So my name is Avinash Persaud. I was born in Barbados and I'm currently the Special Envoy for Climate Change for the government of Barbados and an advisor to Prime Minister Mottley. I'm her Special Envoy. I'm working on climate today. I haven't always worked on climate. I was originally trained as an economist, a financial economist, worked as an investment banker in London before I moved into financial policy, and from financial policy to the biggest problem of the day, climate change. So the reason why we're not moving fast enough on mitigation, which is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, adaptation, which is quite different. It's about building things in such a way, and not always physical things, but building things in such a way that we are resilient to the change in the climate that's already here. One of the reasons why we're not doing enough on both mitigation and adaptation is a lack of finance. It's not because people don't care. It's not because they're not aware and are denying the silence. It's because the shift, the green transformation or resilience is very capital intensive. You need a lot of money up front. People talk about the low cost of renewable energies and solar and wind, but build a wind turbine, you've got to build a solar farm, and you need a lot of money for that. That's called capital intensive. And the cost of capital is very expensive in developing countries. It's cheap in developed countries, the rich countries. And so if we look at where we're making progress, it's in developed countries, not developing countries, because the cost of capital is lower. But if we look at where the future energy demand of the world is coming from, it's in all of these countries where there isn't much progress in the green transformation because the cost of capital is too high. That's why finance has moved from being on the periphery of this debate and this issue, bang in the center of the issue of climate change. So the amount that we need in developing countries, where the big emissions are going to start coming from, historically, so it's important to make the important historical and justice point that we have climate change today, not because of the emissions today, but the historical emissions. Because once greenhouse gases go in the atmosphere, they stay there for sometimes 1,000 years. So the entire industrial revolution is mapped in our atmosphere. And those rich countries got rich by putting greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, but where the new energy demand's coming from are the poor countries. They need $2.4 trillion a year to make this transformation. Now, we believe that the way to get there, $2.4 trillion is a lot of money. All of the aid in the world is only $200 billion. So we need something that's 12 times the amount of aid in the world. We think we can get there if we divide up what we're asking for into three buckets. A bucket for things that create a revenue, a bucket for things that have no revenues but they have savings. An example of that will be a seawall. Building a stronger seawall doesn't generate revenues. I can't pay people to use it because it has to protect everybody. But it does save me a lot of money because the capital city is no longer being flooded every month or every year. And then there are things which have no revenues, no savings, and are just costs. And I need public sector money, I need taxpayers' money for those things. But the revenue stuff, I need to get the private sector to be investing in things that generate a revenue. Solar farms, wind turbines, hydroelectric power, geothermal. We need to get the private sector to do that. So we have a plan, and the plan is achieved by breaking it down into revenues, savings, and cost. We think the things that we need that will generate savings, the multilateral development banks, the big international development banks, can make a significant contribution. Italy is a major shareholder of the multilateral development banks. We need to make these banks 3 times bigger. And on the lost spares money, and Italy has been a leader, one of the leaders in putting some money into the loss and damage fund. But to get to the right size, we need to get new forms of revenues. Things like emissions tax on shipping, an emissions tax on aviation. If everybody paid $5, if every container had $100 behind it, we could get to the amount of money we need to protect countries that are very vulnerable to climate. I think, a big divide is that we think we understand the problem based on our own experience. So, for example, one of the key fault lines in the negotiations today is a phrase. The developed countries want it to be that we all agree that all development finance must be low carbon. Now that seems to make a lot of sense, except that the problem for developing countries today is adaptation. That they are already suffering from climate change. All the countries between the tropics of Cancer and the tropics of Cancer, and Capricorn, are suffering 4 times the loss and damage as those countries outside. So they need adaptation. They need resilience. You know what? Adaptation, resilience, it's not low carbon. It's reinforced special concrete, reinforced with steel. And so we're afraid that if you say all development finance needs to be low carbon, we can't borrow money to be resilient. And if we can't borrow money to be resilient, we're going to get hit time and time again by these disasters, and we will sink under oceans of debt before the sea levels rise up as we try to deal with these disasters. The Bridgetown Initiative, in which Barbados has helped to lead, is not about small islands. It's about the way the world transforms. And a key to that are some of the big emerging countries like India and Brazil and South Africa and Mexico and Indonesia. How do we make sure that we can get international private money coming to those countries? Because that money is currently not going there, because the cost of capital is too high. We need to get the multilateral development banks to find ways of guaranteeing the investors going to those countries for green projects. And that will help to bring the flow of money. We need the development banks to be 3 times bigger to be lending for money for building seawalls and more resilience. And we need a loss and damage fund that's about $30–40 billion spending per year, and that needs new international taxes, emissions taxes. No one likes taxes, but if we don't fund this, we're going to have 1 billion refugees, climate refugees in this world.